Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
we're banning all imports of Russian oil and gas.
The impact the president's action could have on gas prices and the broader economy.
We decided that it is time now for our district to go mask optional.
But the Chicago Teachers Union disagrees. We hear from Union Vice President Stacey Davis Gates.
I don't think parents want that.
Florida is the latest state to pass a so-called Don't Say Gay law. A look at it and other state measures passing across the country.
The history of this past century reflects the history of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs.
And the Chicago Council on Global Affairs turns 100, and its mission to connect Chicago to the world could not be more relevant.
I couldn't go then, and I can't go now, and I don't know what it's going to be like in the future.
Inside a local restaurant where a chef is using a Ukrainian-inspired menu to raise money for the war-torn country.
This is one piece of a greater whole.
And a new community-driven market is just step one of a revitalization effort in Englewood.
The Chicago River has more species of fish than ever before, but scientists warn they could disappear.
When he changed his mind and made a play for you, you'd have nothing to do with him.
And she played Mrs. Patmore on Downton Abbey. Now actor Leslie Nichol tells us about bringing a new show to the Chicago stage. But first, some of today's top stories. Nearly 2 weeks into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, President Joe Biden announces new sanctions on Russian oil.
That means Russian oil will no longer be acceptable at U.S. ports, and the American people will deal another powerful blow to Putin's war machine. Americans have rallied to support their Ukrainian people and made it clear we will not be part of subsidizing Putin's war.
This comes as U.S. gas prices reach a record high. We'll have more on the current state of prices at the pump and what this new sanction could mean in just a bit. And with further hopes of worsening the toll on Russia's economy, Chicago-based McDonald's announces it is temporarily closing its Russia locations and halting operations there. According to the company, they currently employ 62,000 people at its 847 locations in Russia and will continue to pay workers. McDonald's also announced it is paying full salaries for their Ukrainian employees amid operations impacted by the war. Some Chicago public school parents and families are opposing the district's decision to go mask optional starting Monday.
You don't pull the mask just because people are tired of wearing the mask. This has been about dollars and cents from the very beginning. We weren't given the remote option when parents were, when they wanted to go back to the school. Even in September, we should have been still given the remote option, and we were forced back against our will.
Some families are calling on a remote learning option under these new classroom conditions. We'll hear reaction from the Chicago Teachers Union coming up in the program. Former State Senator Thomas Cullerton of Villa Park is pleading guilty to one count of embezzlement. Cullerton was charged in 2019 with fraudulently receiving salary and benefits from a labor union despite doing little or no work, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Cullerton is admitting he improperly took more than $240,000 from the Teamsters labor union. And there's more on this story on our website. Up next, what President Biden's ban on Russian oil could mean for you at the gas pump. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
It's a new front as the U.S. attempts from afar to influence what's happening in Ukraine. As we mentioned earlier, President Biden today announces a ban on all imports of oil from Russia. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more on what consequences that may have abroad and right here at home. Amanda.
Paris, yes, let's start at home where prices of gas are rising. According to AAA, prices in Cook County averaging more than $4.60 a gallon. And it's close to that in collar counties. In Chicago, regular gas going for more than $4.70. A year ago at this time, it was $3.20. Now, it's just not locally. The national average about $4.10 a gallon.
In fact, that average price is the highest ever in nominal terms, but not when you correct for inflation. Corrected for inflation, the price was higher back in 2008. So it's not outrageous, but it will keep going up with volatility. It's going to bounce around as different countries decide whether to ban imports from Russia, and it's going to bounce around along with the progress of the war. If things go badly, the price will go up more.
Now, this even as Biden just announced the ban this morning. So why are prices high already? Northwestern University finance professor Philip Braun says the situation with Russia has caused prices to rise over the past couple of weeks.
So this story started 2 weeks ago when the U.S. and Europe imposed financial sanctions on Russia. Those sanctions make it very difficult for Russian banks to do international transactions. That means that the Russian oil companies cannot do international business. So that in itself is a major bottleneck for Russia, and probably more important than what the U.S. did today by limiting imports.
Braun says the ban on Russian imports isn't likely to hit too hard on the U.S. or on Russia. The United States gets about 8% of its oil from Russia. Meanwhile, the U.S. accounts for about 5% of Russian exports. Still, Matt Hart with the State Trucking Association says gas prices are going to ding trucking companies and drivers in the short run, as they will be on the hook for these higher prices of gasoline and diesel. Now, he says it's a double whammy for the consumer, given that labor costs are high with a truck driver shortage.
In the long term, it hurts the consumer because in the long term, eventually the higher costs of transporting goods leads to higher costs at the grocery store, higher costs at the department store, higher costs on Amazon, because it costs more to transport goods. And our industry transports over 70% of the nation's freight. And when our costs go up, our input costs go up, ultimately that's going to lead to higher costs for the consumer in the end.
Still, he says the trucking industry on principle supports a ban on Russian imports, not wanting to do anything to support that country at this time. He says also that the U.S. is well positioned to react.
The good news is the United States of America is the largest oil producer in the world, and we have a lot of untapped wells, and we do have wells that have been turned off as fuel prices went down, crude oil went down. Now that crude oil has gone up, there's financially viable to turn those wells back on. And we certainly hope that's what happens in the coming weeks, because we have the ability to meet the energy demands of the United States of America without the need for foreign oil.
But getting refineries back online, increasing hires, increasing production, that takes time. And this, as inflation is already a concern and higher gas prices will exacerbate that. It could present a political problem for President Biden, even if a Wall Street Journal poll today shows voters supporting today's move. A handful of governors, including Wisconsin's Democratic governor, are calling on D.C. to temporarily remove a federal gas tax at a time when people are directly impacted by rising prices on everyday goods. A federal gas tax holiday is a tool in the toolbox to reduce costs for Americans. And we urge you to give every consideration to this proposed legislation, they wrote in a letter to the president. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's office did not respond to a question about whether he supports that federal holiday. Now, meanwhile, Northwestern's Braun says that increases related to Ukraine are a worthy expense.
The American consumer, when they go to the gas pump, they have to accept the fact that they need to make sacrifices for the Ukrainians. Yes, gasoline prices are high, but the war in Ukraine is horrible. And there is a trade-off that Americans must make and costs that we must bear.
Meanwhile, U of I's Frolichen says that consumers should already have been preparing for higher gas prices, particularly as governments internationally and here at home in America and Illinois choose to take policies that combat climate change. He says that in the face of that, consumers can make choices to reduce the dependence on gasoline, such as riding a bike, taking public transit, buying a hybrid or electric car. He says that in the long run, that will reduce the country's vulnerability to geopolitical shocks such as this one. With that, back to you in the studio.
All right, Amanda Vinicky, thanks very much. And now to Brandis and the ongoing dispute over in-school masking. Brandis.
Paris, Chicago public school students will have the option of whether to wear masks starting next week. The district's mandate was originally maintained under a contract agreement with the Chicago Teachers Union, despite Illinois dropping masks for schools statewide last week. But yesterday, the district announced it's dropping its own mandate. In response, the Chicago Teachers Union has filed an unfair labor practice charge. Joining us now with more is Chicago Teachers Union Vice President Stacey Davis Gates. Stacey, welcome back. What is your reaction to yesterday's news, first of all? Whoops. There you are.
I'm sorry, Brandis.
Okay.
Thank you for having me. As a parent, I'm a little discouraged to know that someone who is disconnected from Chicago, our school district, and the impacts of decisions here in Chicago gets to make a decision. I'm disappointed that our CEO and mayor elected to choose a legal strategy and not a school safety strategy in this moment. It is a fact that COVID is not what it once was, and thank God for that. And it is also a fact that under 50% of our students are fully vaccinated. It is a fact that our pre-kindergarten students cannot be vaccinated. It is a fact that we have immunocompromised students and workers who are going to need more than just a good luck from our mayor.
You say this is a legal strategy that they've chosen. Why? How's it a legal strategy?
Well, I think if you read their letters and you hear their reasoning in interviews, they are always speaking about not wanting to go in front of a judge and be at the mercy of a judge. So they are choosing a legal strategy. They're not choosing to engage with the families who are 90% Black and brown. They are choosing to privilege less than a handful of parents who are loudly saying that they don't want it. A couple of weeks ago, I filled out a survey asking me as a parent if I wanted masking to still be available in our school communities as mandatory. I've yet to hear the results from that. But I do know that the district's inability under this mayor to work with families who comprise 90% of the school communities, to work with the people who do the work, to come to conclusions about school safety is demoralizing and disrespectful.
So CEO Martinez, he spoke about this earlier today alongside Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady. Here they are.
We're going to continue to work with CTU. They're a valuable stakeholder for us, a valuable partner. I don't anticipate, more serious consequences in terms of work stoppages, but we will continue to work together because we have it in both our best interest to keep our community safe.
Is he wrong? Should the district anticipate another work stoppage over this?
Brandis, that's the wrong question. The question should be, why aren't you engaging the people who comprise the Chicago public schools and making the decisions other than, again, privileging someone who has zero skin in the game? This discussion has always been in a binary that doesn't respect the impact of these decisions. The mask was the one thing that the people who are in the school communities had agency over. It was the easiest mitigation to track. It was the easiest mitigation to put inside in our school communities that worked. So now what do? Are we expanding telework? Do we give accommodations to our students? What are we going to say to pre-K families? Good luck. The absence of a plan, the absence of communication of a plan from our district proves very clearly that without a safety MOU in 21 and in 22, this district would have never had guardrails inside of our school communities to keep people safe.
Stacey, yesterday the CEO said that he had been in communication with CTU. What has the communication been like? Did you all receive any sort of discussion about this before the announcement was made yesterday?
So we don't discuss. Let me tell you this, and I want to make this clear to everyone. Labor, that's us. Management, that's the mayor and Pedro. We bargain, we negotiate. We don't communicate or talk, right? And so a conversation is what I have with my husband and my children. We have a bargaining relationship, and they have a duty to adhere to that bargaining relationship. They have played very fast and loose with their duty for the last 2 years, and it is a dangerous fast and loose. In January, 1 in 5 Chicagoans were infected with COVID, 1 in 5. And they wanted to continue bringing students back into school communities, right? That was dangerous. If it was not for the sacrifice of our membership in that moment, more people would have been sick, and the potential of that illness delving into something else was also possible. That being said, we are still awaiting the Board of Education, the mayor of this city, to come to the negotiating table and to tell us how they're going to continue to keep people safe, because that is still something that we have to do. Again, a very close friend of mine just texted me today and said, I got COVID. I just tested positive, right? These are people that I communicate with, that I engage with and interact with. These are things that still happen in our spaces. And here's what I want to underscore. In this city, we know south of North Avenue has not gotten the attention, the engagement, and the resources to combat this awful virus. There's been $2 billion sent to the Chicago Public Schools to address this. We're still waiting to see where those resources have been allocated. And who is in line to get those resources, Brandis?
And Stacey, before we run out of time, of course, CTU has filed an unfair labor practice with the State Education Labor Relations Board. What do you want to come of that?
Well, we want someone else to tell them what we already know, that they have a duty to sit at a table with us and figure it out. Look, absent a memorandum of understanding for safety, the Chicago Public Schools doesn't have safety policies that respond to the needs of people during COVID. So the duty to negotiate is not just a labor right, it is a health and safety right that all of the humans need in this city.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. I'm sure there will be more to discuss on this going forward. CTU Vice President Stacey Davis Gates, thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
The Chicago Council on Global Affairs turns 100 this year. It was created in 1922 amid isolationist sentiment in the U.S. following World War I. Since then, it has brought an international who's who of speakers to Chicago, everyone from Gorbachev to Thatcher to Obama, to discuss America's place and role in the world. And given recent events in Ukraine, the Council's role would seem as relevant now as it was 100 years ago in 1922. And joining us now with more are Richard Longworth, a distinguished fellow at the Council and formerly a longtime foreign correspondent for the Chicago Tribune and United Press International. Longworth is also the author of the book Chicago and the World, 100 Years of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. And Ivo Dalder, president of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Dalder was U.S. ambassador to NATO from 2009 to 2013. Welcome both of you back to Chicago tonight. Ivo Dalder, you have a major event with some notable speakers on Thursday to celebrate the centennial. Tell us what's on tap.
Yeah, it's really a big event, and you know, it's our first big in-person event since the COVID pandemic shut us down back 2 years ago, almost to the day. We have former President Barack Obama with us, and world-famous cellist Yo-Yo Ma. We'll see who's going to play and who's going to talk foreign and global affairs, but we're going to have a really wonderful evening together with a lot of luminaries from the city and beyond to hear what these two very special people have to say about where the world is today and where we're going.
A crucial time right now, a lot to talk about. Richard Longworth, 1922, the Council was founded. As we mentioned, America is in an isolationist moment, especially the Midwest. So what were the Council's early aims?
The Council's early aims were pretty much just to bring information from overseas to people in Chicago who wanted to hear it. It was felt that there was no other real source of information on things that were going on in the world. And there was a terrific amount going on in the world just then. We just come off World War I. Bolsheviks had just taken over the Soviet Union. Gandhi had begun his work in India, and Mussolini was rising to power in Italy. There was a lot going on out there, but the Midwest was largely isolated from this. And the founders of the council felt that there were people in Chicago who wanted an in-depth understanding of the world and how it connected to Chicago. So they set up the council.
And that isolationist sentiment kind of carried through the beginning of World War II until Pearl Harbor. So how did the council adapt to the changing situation leading up to the U.S.'s involvement in World War II?
With great activity. It was one of the most dramatic times in the council's history. In the 30s, as it became apparent that there was going to be another war in Europe, the big question was, is it our war? Do we get involved in it, or is this just something that's the Europeans' problems? Is this something that we as a democracy have a stake in, or are we best to stay out of it? And there was, as you said, a terrific isolationist feeling, especially in the Midwest, and especially in Chicago, run then by, pushed by the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, Colonel McCormick. The council officially did not take a side. The council officially is nonpartisan. And actually our programs that time featured speakers from both sides, including a couple of out-and-out Nazis. But council leaders, including Adlai Stevenson, who was then president of the council, later governor of Illinois and Democratic nominee for president, led the campaign in the Middle West to send aid to the Allies, to the British, to the French, to help them stand up against the Nazis. Terribly controversial at that time. The activities really stretched the council's nonpartisanship almost to the breaking point. But in the process, the council, through its programs, some of them attracting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people, its broadcasts reaching 200,000 people around the Midwest, these activities really prepared the Midwest for going into World War II.
Council members, officially nonpartisan as part of the council, but obviously preferring engagement. Ivo Dalder, do we see parallels right now? We see existentially a battle between authoritarianism and democracy and freedom in Europe, and a tenuous situation that does have ramifications for the U.S. There are parallels to this moment in history.
Yeah, there absolutely are parallels. In some ways, the world, certainly in Europe, looks very much like the 1930s. We have a major power that has decided to use force in order to change boundaries, and in some ways to usurp another country, because as President Vladimir Putin said, Ukraine really isn't a country. It's really part of Russia and needs to be part of Russia. And we even see parallels in trying to unite a certain group of people, in this case, Russian-speaking people, under a similar umbrella, just as the Nazis were trying to bring back the Germans under its own wing. So those are the parallels in terms of the threat. In terms of the response, however, there's a big difference. Remember that in the 1930s, very few countries were willing to engage in the war. Of course, France and Britain declared war on Germany after Poland was attacked. But for the rest, countries in Europe wanted to remain neutral. And of course, the United States, as Dick just said, wanted to stay out of the war. Now we see the world united. We see the United States, its allies in Europe, and indeed even allies in countries in Asia and around the world, not only condemning what the Russians have done, but moving to act swiftly, both to help the Ukrainians with military and other forms of assistance, and to isolate the Russians economically and politically. We see countries like Singapore and Switzerland, normally on the sidelines, wanting to stay out of any conflict, siding with the Western countries against Russia, with the people of Ukraine. And that is a big difference. It's also one of the reasons why, despite all the horrific images we're seeing coming out of Ukraine, I do think in the end, Vladimir Putin will have miscalculated, and this will end in a way that we wanted to see it.
Council played a role in this, if I may say so, in its programming after World War II. In the formation of NATO, in the Marshall Plan, in spreading the idea that we had a permanent role to play in Europe and that the alliance was really important to us. The Council helped lay the groundwork for what we see now in this rather amazing cooperation among the Allies.
Right. You had George Marshall speak, talking about the Marshall Plan. You've had people, as we mentioned, Gorbachev, Thatcher, Robert McNamara, talking about the mistakes in Vietnam. Richard, over the years, any of these moments that really stand out to you?
I think probably the speech by George Marshall when he came out here to speak about the Marshall Plan, very controversial at the time. This was not exactly a sure thing that the Marshall Plan would be adopted. So Marshall came out here, chose the Council as his platform to speak to the Midwest, to build up support for the Marshall Plan. When Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister of India, came here shortly after the war, talking about the role of nationalism in world affairs and especially in Asia. I think that was a very important thing. Henry Kissinger came several times to talk about American foreign policy. We had a wonderful debate during the Vietnam War between Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was all in favor of a very active and aggressive American foreign policy, and the University of Chicago scholar Hans Morgenthau, who was more on the side of restraint, talking about how far the United States should be involved in the world. Was every battle our battle? Were we the world's policeman or not? The intellectual quality of these speeches still resonates today.
And these debates still had at the Chicago Council, and bringing all these leaders to Chicago so Chicagoans can be a part of these debates. Congratulations to both of you on the centennial, and our thanks to Richard Longworth and Ivo Dalder for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, a local chef creates a Ukrainian-inspired menu. We give you a taste right after this.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
There's much more ahead on the program, including a look at Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay law and other similar state measures. But first, a restaurant owner is using his culinary skills to help keep Ukrainian culture alive in the city. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez meets the chef to see what he's cooking to raise awareness about the situation in Ukraine.
It's dinner service at Wherewithal Restaurant.
I have use for two.
Chef Johnny Clark has cooked up a special menu honoring his Ukrainian roots.
My grandmother's home is being destroyed, and it just hit me personally, and I was like, I just want to do something right now.
That's when he decided to create a Ukrainian-inspired 4-course meal, dishes that bring back memories of his late grandmother.
My grandmother used to tell me one of her favorite foods was head cheese, which is like a pig's head. It's all the meat and stuff is pulled apart and then put back together and the gelatin kind of formed. Sometimes they would just have bread, and that was all they could get.
As the world watches hundreds of thousands of refugees flee Ukraine, Clark remembers his grandmother's journey out of the country many years ago.
She was scared to talk about Russia in any negative way. Even growing up in Ohio, I grew up in Ohio, she'd tell me stories. She was still scared to speak out loud about the Soviet Union. They took her father in the middle of the night when she was about 13 years old. And they never saw him again. Every Christmas, my grandmother would make deviled eggs. I don't know if that's a Ukrainian thing or not, but I'm sure there is. She used to bring this big round tray that held all the deviled eggs in place.
Diners are pouring in to show solidarity.
I'm actually from Bratislava, which is bordering Ukraine. This is actually made in Ukraine, and I wanted to wear it today to show my support.
Another customer, who only gave his name as Matt in fear of putting his family in danger, shares the importance of preserving his culture now more than ever.
I've always loved my heritage, and I've always been proud, but I've never been as proud as I am now. I'm especially proud of President Zelensky, who has just become such a hero.
The owner says a portion of sales will be going directly to a non-profit organization working to help Ukrainians.
We're there in spirit, and we are razum,
another. What does that mean?
Razom means together.
Fire apps for 7.
Chef Clark says creating this menu has helped him navigate the painful events happening to his people.
Hopefully it resonates with them, like this is what, these are flavors of, of Ukraine. But also there's some personal expression in there too, just still trying to be creative with the food, and it's not traditional but inspired, taking that inspiration from Ukrainian recipes. I'm very proud Ukrainian, and it hurts. I don't know if I can even go there, anymore.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Chef Clark says the Ukrainian cuisine was such a success that he's extending the menu with new Ukrainian flavor dishes. There are more details on this on our website. And now, Paris, back to you.
All right, Brandis, thanks very much. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, changes in water management have led to more fish in the Chicago River. Efforts to make sure all that hard work doesn't go to waste. Florida is the latest state to pass a so-called Don't Say Gay law. A look at the legislation and other measures passing across the country. Produce, healthy groceries, and fresh-cooked meals inside a new community market that's one part of a neighborhood revitalization plan. And actor Leslie Nichol talks about the new Downton Abbey film and her show of music and stories coming to the Chicago stage. But first, some more of today's top stories. Illinois hotel leaders say economic recovery isn't going well for the industry. This after 2 years of disruption due to the pandemic. The Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association is calling on elected officials to pass the Hotel Jobs Recovery Plan, which would allocate funds to hotels across the state to rehire workers.
The state lost $5.4 billion in room revenue between 2020 and 2021 combined, and included more than $1 billion in lost tax revenue for state and local municipalities. Illinois also lost 40% of all the hotel jobs from 2019 to 2021.
And make sure to tune in tomorrow. We'll have more on hotel recovery efforts. City health officials removed 12 states from the COVID-19 travel advisory as cases decline. Wisconsin, Indiana, Florida, Hawaii, New York, and 7 others, seen here in yellow, are among those removed. Under the advisory, the city requests but does not require unvaccinated travelers to be tested for COVID before and after travel from any state on this advisory list, as seen here in orange, and should quarantine upon arrival in Chicago. Major League Baseball is running the risk of canceling another week of games if there's no deal reached by the end of today. This comes as the league has already canceled each team's first 2 series of the season. MLB has told the union owners that the owners are now unlikely to approve a full 162-game schedule this year or grant players full pay or service time. The league is currently creating an initial $1 million fund to support ballpark workers affected by missed spring training games. In the 1980s, there were just 5 fish species found in the Chicago River. One of them, a goldfish. Fast forward to today, and the goldfish now have more than 60 other species accompanying them in the river, mostly thanks to a decrease in wastewater pollutants. But biologists warn that all that hard work could disappear. WTTW News reporter Patty Wetley joins us now to explain. So, Patty, first of all, what led to this explosion in fish species in the river, and remind us why that's a positive thing.
Yeah, well, a scientist at the Shedd Aquarium working with a coworker at the MWRD looked at all of the possibilities, and it turned out that decreasing the sewage overflows, the wastewater sewer combined overflows, was the biggest predictor for an increase in diversity in fish. So all the work that the MWRD has been doing to keep sewer overflows out of the river has been working in terms of seeing more fish. And, you know, fish are a great indicator of the overall health of the river and ecosystem. You know, if they're present, then that means the things that they feed on are present. And the more fish means that otters can come back because they have something to eat. So it's just a big win for biodiversity overall.
A veritable buffet for those river otters. So, Patty, as we mentioned at the top, there's some ominous signs. What could threaten all this progress?
Yeah, well, for one thing, climate change, if we start to see an increase in the frequency and severity of heavy rainfalls, like we've had some seriously wet Mays that can, again, increase the sewer overflow. So that can undo some of the progress. But also the presence of salt in the river is a concern. And that's from all that road salt that we use, not just on streets, but on our sidewalks, washes into that system. And salt is impossible to get out of the water, and it's not great for wildlife.
Certainly not fish used to freshwater environments.
Exactly.
All right, Patty, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Patty's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. There has been a wave of anti-lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender laws being passed across the country as more people than ever before self-identify as LGBTQ. Just today, the Florida legislature passed the so-called Don't Say Gay bill, which Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to sign. Take a look.
Do you really want them to be being taught about sex? And this is any sexual stuff, but I think clearly right now we see a lot of focus on the transgenderism, telling kids that they may be able to pick genders and all that. I don't think parents want that for these young kids.
So what effect are these laws having on the psychological health of LGBTQ kids and their parents? Are they constitutional? And do queer people have reason to fear for the future? Here to help answer those questions are Camilla Taylor, the Director of Constitutional Litigation for Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest national legal organization committed to the civil rights of lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transgender people, and those with HIV. And Brian Mustansky, a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, also the director of the Institute for Sexual and Gender Minority Health and Well-Being. Thanks to you both for joining us. So as we said, in Florida, the Parental Rights in Education bill, it's headed to Governor Ron DeSantis' desk. He's expected to sign it. Opponents have dubbed it the Don't Say Gay legislation. Camilla, starting with you, tell us exactly what this bill does and what is the penalty if the law is broken?
Well, it's a cruel and unconstitutional travesty. It would require teachers to out LGBTQ students if they have a suspicion that they might be LGBTQ to their parents, even if their parents are not affirming. And it would also suppress the ability of teachers to speak in affirming ways about sexual orientation and gender identity. And it raises the specter of a child, an elementary school child, for example, who might have two parents of the same sex, and that child would not be allowed to do a presentation during a unit when all of the other kids are invited to make presentations about their families, simply because their family structure includes a same-sex couple. It is absolutely going to be terrible for kids, and it's censorship and unconstitutional.
And I think supporters of the bill have said that, more specifically, the bill is designed to prevent, especially in the lower grades in elementary school, any sort of teaching or discussion about LGBTQ matters, gender identity, those topics.
That's right. Exactly.
Brian Mustansky, what kind of fear does this put on kids and teachers? I imagine it would have a chilling effect about being able to discuss this with kids.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of research studies that have examined this from a variety of different angles. And what we see is that these social policies do have an effect on the mental health of the LGBT community. There have been studies that have looked at schools that have anti-bullying policies. There have been studies that have looked at the effects of laws that prohibited gay marriage as they were being passed in different states, seeing the negative effects that those kinds of policies have on the mental health of the LGBT community. So we can anticipate that these kinds of laws, because they seek to silence people, pretend like they don't exist, really will have negative effects on the mental health of LGBT young people and adults in those states. And I think it's worth pointing out that, LGBT people don't emerge at age 18 fully formed like the Greek goddess Aphrodite from the sea. They exist before the age of 18, and these laws aren't going to do anything to change that. LGBT people are still going to exist. The question is, are we going to silence them, stigmatize them, and make them feel bad about themselves in ways that are adversely going to affect the health of those citizens?
So Iowa is also the 11th state to prohibit transgender girls and women from participating in sports. Bills under consideration next door in Indiana as well as Missouri. Camilla, they say this is about leveling the playing field, but what about this argument ensures fair competition?
Well, this is another unconstitutional attack on transgender young people. And in the states where these athlete bans have passed, West Virginia, for example, we've managed to get it enjoined in court, which means that we've managed to get a court order that prevents this law from going into effect. There is absolutely no reason to target transgender young people who simply wish to participate in sports and receive all of the benefits of being part of a team, for example, that other young people are able to enjoy. And it is simply an example of creating a false narrative that's designed to attack kids and to prevent them from being fully included in school.
So moving to Texas, under the governor's order there, child abuse investigations are allowed into parents who allow puberty-blocking hormones for their trans children. But a judge has granted a request for a temporary restraining order on an investigation of a trans child and her parents. Brian Mustansky, coming to you first on this one. Tell us about these hormone blockers. Are they safe? How are they used?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to emphasize that the decision of whether young people and their families pursue gender-affirming treatments is a real personal decision between young people and their parents in collaboration with a multidisciplinary team of medical providers, often pediatricians and endocrinologists. These are not decisions that are entered lightly. This is something that's done with a lot of consideration and evaluation. Puberty suppressing hormones are just one example of the type of medical care that people can get as part of the gender affirming process. These types of hormones have been used to delay puberty, for example, since the 1980s. They're very well studied. They're reversible, and they're often used as a way to give young people more time to consider the development of their gender identity, to avoid the development of secondary sex characteristics like the Adam's apple and other things that are more difficult to change later in life. And so, these are many medical organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychiatric Association, Society for Research on Child Development. I could go on and on. Do not support these kinds of policies being proposed in Texas. They're really recommending that this be a decision between medical providers, the family, and a young person versus something that would be decided by state legislatures. And so, this is something widely studied and something that has international standards in terms of how it's approached.
There are more than 266 anti-LGBTQ plus bills under consideration in state legislatures across the country. This is according to the Human Rights Campaign. Camilla, will these laws stand up to judicial scrutiny? Are they going to make it past a court?
Absolutely not. They're already being toppled, but they're having a damaging effect nonetheless. We represent the family in Texas that is being targeted for a child abuse investigation as a result of Governor Abbott's letter. His letter, which was issued just before his contested primary, using trans children as a political football, redefined child abuse to include the types of care that Dr. Mustansky was just describing that are absolutely the standard of care and ethically required by all the major medical associations. And by targeting trans children in this way, Governor Abbott is targeting their health care, targeting their parents, causing them to fear the specter of being separated as a family, and causing all sorts of confusion among all sorts of medical professionals and teachers who qualify as mandatory reporters, and whether they're going to face some sort of penalty if they don't turn in families simply for doing what's medically advised.
And with, it sounds like, a number of bills across the country, a lot of work for you all to do and something to keep an eye on for sure, but we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to Camilla Taylor and Brian Mustansky for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Brenda.
Mayor Lori Lightfoot joined residents and community leaders in Englewood earlier today for the opening of the new Go Green Community Fresh Market.
A community needs some basic things. Access to healthy food, of course, is at the top of the list. And we've got to recommit ourselves, not only here, but in every food desert across our city.
It's designed to be as convenient as a neighborhood corner store, but with fresh produce, a variety of healthy options, and meals cooked on site. And as Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, it's just one part of an effort to bring new life to Englewood.
A 30-year life expectancy gap just 9 miles apart. So said a 2019 NYU study, which found the average Streeterville resident lives to 90 and the average Englewood resident lives to 60.
And that happens to be the largest life expectancy gap in the country. So Go Green on Racine is really an effort that aims to bridge that gap.
And it's a collective effort, including the Inner City Muslim Action Network, Rage Englewood, E.G. Wood, and Teamwork Englewood. Its first project, the Go Green Community Fresh Market at 63rd and Racine.
The goals of this market are really to make healthy foods accessible and affordable to the community, but also we want to do it in a way that doesn't make it like a specialty food store, right? We want to do this in a way that still feels like a neighborhood grocery store.
And it's the kind of place that cook and storekeeper Jahari Fultz says many residents don't have easy access to.
My aunt, she actually lives like right there. Like she has to travel, and she's older, and she doesn't really have like a person like me who is always available to help her. So it's good that, she could just come here.
The market's also set to feature community events and classes and fresh food made on site.
My favorite right now is the chicken wrap, the chicken taco wrap to be exact, right? And it is delicious. But besides that, we do have a wide range of, options available that I think the community will love.
But it's not just about creating a place to buy fresh produce and other healthy groceries. Go Green on Racine says it's taking a holistic approach to tackling historic disinvestment.
Just south of the market on Racine sits the former Granville T. Woods Academy, one of the dozens of CPS schools shuttered in a wave of closures in 2013. Go Green on Racine is working to turn it into the Regenerator, which will include 42 units for people returning from incarceration.
We know that returning citizens, many of whom come home to Englewood every year, more than 1,000, struggle with re-entry, and especially successfully re-entering society.
So, the Regenerator is also set to feature health, wellness, and job supports. Leaders are also advocating for reopening the Racine Green Line stop, which has been closed since 1994, creating a mile-long gap between the Halstead and Ashland stations.
Englewood residents are able to access 280,000 jobs within a 30-minute travel radius, compared to 1 million jobs for a North Side residents.
It's an effort with a lot of angles, but the people behind Go Green on Racine say a holistic approach is the only option.
You provide housing, you provide a place to sleep, you provide health care, you provide a place to eat, you provide great dining options. It all kind of circulates within the economy of the community, which is a benefit for everyone.
And while they're celebrating the grand opening of the Go Green Market, leaders say they know there's much more to do since the project is driven by people rooted in the community.
We take a different perspective than many other folks who come through for one-off projects. There's a longer-term endeavor at stake.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Go Green on Racine received a low-income housing tax credit from the city late last year. They hope to break ground on the Regenerator in 2023. As for the Racine Green Line station, the CTA told WTTW News it is aware of the request, but that the station would need an estimated $100 million of work or more before it can go back into service with no funding currently available. And the agency says a 2017 ridership analysis found the station would see fewer average weekday rides than when it was closed in the 1990s. Up next, a Downton Abbey fan favorite brings her one-woman show to Chicago. But first, a look at the weather.
Actress Leslie Nichol is best known for playing the head cook, Mrs. Patmore, for 6 seasons of Downton Abbey on television and then 2 movies, the latest of which is set to be released in theaters in May. Now she'll be on stage in Chicago for the premiere of her autobiographical show, How the Hell Did I Get Here? And we are pleased to welcome back Leslie Nichol to Chicago Tonight. So good to see you. Wish we could have you here in studio. And before we get to what brings you to town, I know the trailer for the new era of Downton Abbey was released. It's coming out in May. What can you tell us about this sequel?
Well, I've seen it, not on the big screen. I think it'll be phenomenal on the big screen because it looks so beautiful. I saw it like on an iPad. It's not quite as good, I'm here to tell you. But it's packed with, and that's a very interesting storyline. But meanwhile, stuff goes on at the house with us that didn't go to France that you won't see coming. It's kind of quite
As I understand, you're filming a movie, I think. I think you're allowed to
Yes, indeed.
that.
But
Yes.
what happens with the staff, you won't see that coming. I can tell you that.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to that in May. And now to your stage show, How the Hell Did I Get Here? You're premiering it here in Chicago. First of all, remind us where the idea for this show came from.
Well, I was living in Los Angeles. This all started off about 4 or 5 years ago. I had become friends with a very clever songwriter, American songwriter called Mark Muller. Mark's had a phenomenal career as a musician and a songwriter. He's one of those guys who's got a wall full of, platinum and gold discs. So he knows what he can write a tune, that's for sure. But we were just friends, and I was talking to him one night and saying, I have this kind of niggling thing. I want to do a show. And he started writing songs, and then he couldn't stop. It's as simple as that, I swear.
And your fans might need to be reminded, you are a singer. You were in Mamma Mia, Jesus Christ Superstar, so this is not a new thing for you. You're a musical actress.
I always counter it by saying I'm an actress who sings. But yes, I have done musicals, you're right. I started in Jesus Christ Superstar in the West End when I was very young, and I did a lot of musicals all around the theatre, but I haven't just done those primarily. I've done I'll do a musical, and then there might be 3 years when I don't do one. So I've had the good fortune to dip in and out, if you see what I mean. And so, yeah.
And is this show completely autobiographical?
Yes, every single word of it is true. But what I do want to say is, as we developed it, it was never intended to be the Leslie Nichols show. It is my story, but we have designed it very much as something that I hope the audience will watch and completely relate to. It's not just about being an actress, it's about being a human being. It's about being shy. It's about having a terrible boyfriend situation. It's about a weight issue that was a bit of a problem, and good stuff and bad stuff. The point being, what I wanted to feel like is we are all actually the same. We have our highs, we have our lows, we have our good bits and bad bits. You can't avoid that. And that's what I want people to feel when they come out, is we've had a shared experience where they're invited to kind of remember stuff about their own journey as much as they're seeing mine.
Speaking of highs and lows, you've talked before about your own career. You found your greatest success later on. So what are the pros and cons of, as you put it, being a late developer?
Yeah, it's funny. That's what I was always told when I was a kid. My family always said she's a late developer, which is completely proven true. Honestly, I think it's the right way around, to be honest, because, it does happen for people that they have huge success when they're young, ingenue, young, pretty actors, whatever, and then it goes downhill from there. I'm very glad it's the other way around. I did okay. I had a nice career in the sense that I did what I loved doing, made a living, wasn't a household name, but worked enough to be able to support myself and do what I loved doing. I considered myself extremely lucky. And then Downton came just at a time when everybody says, oh, you're not going to get any kind of big break now, you're way too old. Well, that's not true. And similarly, I found my husband when I was in my 50s, late 50s. People will tell women that too. Oh, no, it's too late for you, you won't find anybody. I'm very happy to tell this story and say to people, don't listen to that. Life-changing stuff happens for people. You don't know when it's going to happen.
And I'm assuming doing a one-woman show is life-changing now, too.
Yeah.
Are you nervous about kind of carrying the load all yourself and not having an ensemble?
Yes, it's completely opposite to anything I've ever done. But the bonus is Mark, my lovely co-writer Mark, is playing for me. So he's at the piano with me. So I won't be completely on my own. And this is our baby. We've really worked very hard at this, and it feels very right that he should be on that stage with me. And you know what? They always say, because I haven't done this before, you're right. They always say what happens is the audience become your pal. Instead of the actors on the stage, the audience take that role. And I'm very much talking to the audience and relating to them. So I hope that is what will happen.
And it's exciting that you're debuting this here in Chicago, a 3-week run here in Chicago before you go to New York. And again, How the Hell Did I Get Here? It opens this weekend and runs through April 3rd at the Greenhouse Theater Center. And Leslie Nichol, thank you so much for coming back here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Please come and see it.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Indicted former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan is scheduled to be arraigned. We follow the story.
And invasive tree species may be threatening Chicago's native wildlife, but some local efforts are turning the ecological problems into works of art. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.